Cuida tu modern English,
or CTM English.
a podcast of two English teachers who became friends after moving to Chile.
We share real life entertaining stories of our experiences in Chile in a conversational way so you can gain exposure to native pacing with the extra support you may not be able to get through the usual forms of media.
So you can learn intermediate to advanced English from anywhere in the world. We also do a short vocabulary review at the end to help the new words stick.
So grab your coffee, wine, or piscola and let's get started.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are proudly presenting
¡Concha tu madre!
¿Qué te pasa, concha tu madre?
Concha tu madre.
Concha tu madre, concha tu madre.
Váyanse a la concha de tu madre, chuche su madre.
Cuida tu modern English. You said that you had two airport stories. So you talked about the chicken. What was the
Yes.
other thing that you misheard in an airport?
Okay, I'm excited for this one because you don't know this one.
Okay.
Okay.
I didn't know the chicken either, to
Oh,
be
yeah.
fair. That was
Okay.
my live reaction.
Okay, so it wasn't my first time flying back from Santiago, but it was my first time buying alcohol ever. And pisco, in Chile is so incredibly cheap in comparison to in the US. So even the lowest, like Capel. Well, Capel in Indiana is like $40 to $50 a bottle.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah. And so I was like, I'm gonna buy all the pisco. And so I bought like 2 bottles of pisco and like a bottle of wine. And I go up to the cash register to check out. And she says something to me in Spanish. And I thought that I understood her. I do remember I asked her to say it again. And I told her like my Spanish is not that great, in Spanish. And then she said it back to me, and I was like, okay, she's telling me to move to the right and wait over here. And I think she's going to give me the bag. And I thought, well, I'll take the bag. And I think you have to take that to the person that checks you in for the airplane because I know that you can't just like bring it straight onto the plane. So I
Yeah.
knew that part. But I was like, how does that happen? Then how do you get the alcohol on the plane? Like, I don't
Yeah.
understand. And so I moved over and I was like waiting and waiting and I see her eventually like start to look over at me like what is she doing? And I'm still standing there. And then I remember she said something to me like, are you okay? And I thought she was just like checking on me in between other customers. Like I thought somebody was doing something like putting the bag together somewhere or something. I don't know what I was thinking, but I was so nervous. I was just like, I don't know what's
Yeah,
happening.
I'm just imagining her looking over and seeing you so nervous standing there and being like, hi, are you okay?
I mean, I don't think I like visually looked nervous.
Okay, it was like internal.
Yeah, it was like I was leaning up against a wall, like
You were chill.
chilling. I'm just chilling. But like I can't imagine if I were that cashier, and somebody else had just bought liquor and was just standing there leaning against the wall staring at you like, when do I get my bag, And so eventually she helped the last customer and then I went back up to her and I said, "Where do I pick up my bag?" And she was like, "Oh, that's why you were still waiting there." I was like, "Uh-oh." And she was like trying to tell me, "Oh, they'll give it to you on the plane. They'll give it to you on the plane." And I was like, "How will they give it to you on the plane? Like, I don't understand this process." But I was like, "You know what? I'm just gonna go. I'm just gonna go because I'm taking up way too much time with this lady and I have to go. My flight is leaving. Like, okay, whatever." And I really just thought I was abandoning the liquor. I was like, okay.
You were like, I just spent so much money on alcohol and I'm just gonna leave it.
I was so embarrassed and like I felt like a helpless little puppy. I'm just like, I don't know what I'm doing. This person is talking to me. I have no idea what she's saying. And whatever. But Anyway, and then I went and sat down, and for the first time in my life ever, I hear my name over the intercom, and I'm like, "Oh God." And I and so again, I get really nervous, and I mean, like, I'm sweating, and it's so stupid because I spoke enough Spanish at the time, I just couldn't understand when people were talking yet,
Yeah.
because I wasn't used to the Chilean accent, and so anyway, I get up to the counter and the guy starts speaking to me in English and my jaw dropped. I was like, "Oh my God, somebody that speaks English, thank you." He was like, "Poor girl."
Yeah, it makes it so much more stressful when it's a situation like, if you've never done it before in English and now
Yeah.
you're doing it in Spanish, it's like
Yeah. Yeah, and then I realized, of course, like, I asked him, "What is the process for buying liquor and getting on the plane?" And he was like, "Oh, you just have to go in there and they'll give it to you right before you go into the plane." And I was like, "Oh, duh. Got it."
it does feel like one of those things that, like, everyone just knows how to do, but,
Yeah.
like, no one talks about it. It's like,
Yeah,
how do you
because
do
if you're not
like, a
used to it.
secret.
Yeah, it's like when I came back into the States when I was moving back, and the security guards there in Miami just assumed that everybody knew what to do. And this one security guard was just like yelling at people like, "Get in the line, get in line." And this poor Chilean in front of me had no idea what that meant or what to do. And he was trying to be so nice, and he went up to the guy and was, trying to figure out how to say in Spanish, like, "What do I do?" Or in English. And he just couldn't do it, and so he started speaking Spanish at the guy, and the guy just grunts at him, literally grunted, and
Oh my god.
points at the line, and he's like, "Ugh." And I was like,
Jeez.
"Oh my god." And you
They're
can
so
tell.
aggressive in Miami, I
I know,
don't know why.
I know. Well, I think this guy was just, like, really having a bad day, like, I don't know what his
Yeah.
deal was, but he must have not had coffee or something, I don't know. It was, like, 4 in the morning, but, like, still, I was like, "What is your deal, dude?" And so, anyway, the poor Chilean just gets this helpless look on his face, like, "I have no idea what to do, this guy's grunting at me," and so I finally, like, tapped him on the shoulder, and I was like, "Necesitas hacer una la fila." "Oh, gracias, gracias, gracias." Oh my god, it was, and I was just like, "Oh, man, I feel you."
Yeah, you're like, "I've been you, so
I
I'm
have
gonna be your
Yeah.
guardian angel because I would have wanted one when I
Yes.
was in the duty free."
Right? Like, screw this whole process, like, they don't even explain it to you. I feel like they need an infographic, you know?
And when I was in Miami, I saw was a group of Chileans in front of me, and, like, you needed to go off to the left. Like, we were walking around the airport, through security, you needed to go to the left to get your bag and then bring it to the right or something.
Yeah.
And a guard said that to the people in front of me, and they just nodded their heads
Yep.
and just, like, walked straight. And I was like, "No, no, no, guys, guys.
No, no,
He
no,
told
no.
you to, like, go to the left and get your bag." It seems like
Oh.
it's an ongoing issue that
Yeah.
they don't explain things well in the
Yes.
airport.
No. And actually, I do remember the first time that I came to Santiago, and I had to recheck my stuff in because I was going from international to domestic. That's when I
Mm.
was flying down to Concepcion. And I remember getting up to where you have to check in your baggage, and I was just like, again, so nervous. And I was trying so hard to understand them. And at one point, I felt so dumb because I was like, I know I can speak Spanish, like, to a certain level. I mean, I'm not fluent, I'm not great at the time, And I'm still not great, but I can say that I'm fluent. So this lady was like, I'm gonna go ask this other lady who I'm gonna go find someone that speaks English. And so she's like yelling this lady's name and like, come over here. And the lady comes over and she starts trying to speak to me in like very broken English. And I'm just like so happy to have somebody that can tell me what to do.
Yeah, it's like even I think that's like an important thing to know even for like if you need English for your work because you need to interact with English speakers, even
Yeah.
if you feel insecure about your level of English, I
Mhm.
feel like people are just so grateful that you're
Yeah.
even like able to explain anything to them
Yeah.
because they might feel just as lost as you
Yeah. Yeah, and
if they're
actually, it's really interesting now because working in a restaurant where, you know, there's a lot of Door Dashers that come in and pick up food.
DoorDash
Um,
is like our Rappy
yeah, yeah, sorry. I
or
forgot.
Pedidos, yeah.
Pedidos, yeah. Yeah. Or Uber Eats. Ah, we
Uber
have
Eats,
Uber Eats here too.
yeah.
That's fun. But yeah, so they come in and I would say like I don't know, at least 50% of them are from Venezuela and they hardly barely speak English at all. And so every time they come in, I never assume that they're from Venezuela or anywhere really. I just assume they're from here. But as soon as they start talking and they really don't even know the word for like over there, and
Mhm.
I'll just point and I'll be like, over there or whatever. And they respond to me and they're like, allá. And I'm like, say, yeah, yeah. Necesitas ir a la derecha. Muchas gracias, muchas gracias. And like,
They're like, "Oh, thank God." Like
yeah,
the same thing that you felt.
yeah, exactly. So I always try when they don't, when they don't speak English to me, I know that they don't speak enough. And so I speak Spanish back to them.
I was thinking of misunderstandings. I've had my own fair share, and
Oh,
one
yeah.
of the ones that I remember all the time is that I was in Santiago with my now husband, with Jorge, and we wanted to get like a sweet treat. We wanted to get like a piece of cake or something like that. And so we went to this bakery and I really like tres leches cake. And I
Mm.
saw that they had tres leches cake. So I go up to the counter and I told the guy that worked there, like, yeah, can I please have, in Spanish, I told him, can I please have like a slice of tres leches cake? And he responded to me in Spanish and was like, yeah, we have different kinds of tres leches. We have like vanilla, chocolate, and like strawberry or something. But I didn't understand that he was like telling me that like I thought that he was just like, "Oh, you want tres leches? Well, we have like vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry cake." Like I thought he was just like telling me about other cakes that they had. And I responded, I was like, "I want tres leches." And he's like,
Oh,
"Yeah." And he was like so nice. He was like, "Yeah, that's great. Anyways, we have vanilla chocolate or strawberry tres leches. Like, which one do you want?" And I was like, "Tres leches." And he was like, "Okay, we have vanilla chocolate." And we
oh,
had this back and forth for so long. When I realized after that the whole time he was like understanding me and just telling me that they had different flavors of tres leches cake, I was like, I feel so embarrassed. Like, oh my god.
I feel like that probably happened to me multiple times. I just can't think of a specific instance of it, but I do know that feeling where you're like, yeah, I get it. Like, okay, it's like you really don't get it.
Yeah, I was like, why does he keep trying to sell me their other cakes? Like,
Oh,
stop.
oh my God. I love that. That's
Um,
so funny.
yeah, that's like my cursed interaction with someone that works at a store.
Yeah.
Also, another thing that's difficult about coming here as a foreign person is that there's a lot of double meanings to words. So if
Mhm.
you have a misunderstanding, you might also like accidentally say something sexual or accidentally
Yes.
say something offensive. And that has happened to me a lot of times
Oh no.
with in different situations. Like I remember when came here the first time and I was studying abroad, I went to the Fondas during the 18
Yeah.
and I told my host mom at the time after asked me like, what did you eat in the fondas? And I told her I had choro.
Ah.
I was trying to say churro, like a churro, like
Oh,
a sweet, I don't
yeah,
know,
the
whatever, like
the fried
cinnamon
stick.
stick.
Yeah.
But she was like, "What?" And she, I don't know, had
Oh
like
my
a,
God.
she was kind of laughing at me, and I was like, "No, I didn't eat, I didn't eat that in the fondas." And the other,
Oh
and
my God.
the other weird one that happened to me was with a Spanish teacher that we got like through the company that we worked at. I was in a class with her and we were talking about the word sapo.
Oh.
And I remember she said something like, "Do you know what sapo means?" And she was thinking like frog. And I was like,
Oh.
"Yeah, do you mean like frog or do you mean the Chilean meaning?" And I was thinking of the Chilean meaning like the guy that's in the micro that like, or not the guy that's in the micro, but it's the guy that looks out for the other micros. At least
Oh
in Villa and
yeah.
Valpo, they call
Uh-huh.
that guy the sapo.
Yeah. Because he's nosy.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
like watching for the next micro. And
Yeah.
so I was thinking of that or like nosy in general. Like it has
Yeah.
several meanings. And so I was like,
So
"Do you
many
mean?"
meanings.
And then she turned red and she was like, "Oh, ha ha ha." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't mean like I feel like I always say something that also means like female genitals."
Well,
And
I
I'm
mean,
like,
come on,
"That's not
though.
my
There's
fault."
literally 5,000 of them in Chile. So, I mean, you can't really avoid it.
Yeah, I feel like that just adds another layer because I feel like if you have a misunderstanding with the wrong person and they
Oh,
think that
yeah.
you like said something sexual to them, it could lead to weird situations.
Yeah, like imagine being in a job interview.
Yeah.
I was so worried when I graduated the like software development boot camp because my first interview, which in order to become a software developer or at a company and to get a job, you have to pass these technical interviews that are just absolutely, I don't even know what one word could possibly describe it. It's really annoying. And my very first one was in Spanish. And so it was so frustrating trying to figure out what they were actually asking me. And I will say after I figured it out and after they did switch to English at some point because software developers have to know a certain level of English usually.
Mhm.
And so they explained it to me in English after I was like, "What?" It was bizarre anyway what they were the questions that they were asking me. So I didn't feel so bad after that, but I tell people now, like, my first interview was in Spanish and, like, software developers here, and they're like, "Oh my god." Like, they're
That's
like
hardcore.
yeah, because like, your first interview is always, like, you're probably 99% of the time not gonna get it unless you went to, like, school for computer science, and even then, like, probably not. And, so they were just like, "Dang," like, just went all in.
0 to 100, yeah.
Yep, and I was like, "Well, I lived in Chile when I graduated this boot camp, so I needed a job. What are you gonna do?"
Yeah, the good thing is, like, any interview after that will just no matter what,
Oh,
will
yeah.
be a little less hardcore.
Yeah, exactly. That was probably one of the hardest things, like, when anybody asked me, like, "What was the hardest part about, your software development journey?" or whatever, I'm gonna be like, "Try to do an interview in a foreign language?"
Yeah, definitely. I have a
Mm.
lot of empathy for people that need to learn English for work
Yeah.
and need to, like, do it immediately. I think
Yes.
that's so intense, yeah.
Yeah. There is a Venezuelan that I work with now that came here, and I think he started working maybe like a month before I worked at the restaurant. And when I started, his English was very, very, very low. And I tried to help him out as much as I could, but he really has learned so much. And now He can understand people a lot more. There was one time where the chef that was working with him got really upset. This is somebody that is just I nobody likes working with this particular chef.
Okay.
And yeah,
I got the picture.
right, right. And so this chef started yelling at him because he wasn't doing what he wanted him to do. And he was like, "No, I'm just asking you something simple. Like why don't you get it? Why don't you understand?" And I kind of was just like staring at this whole interaction go down, and I was like, "Oh my god, rude," but then he
Yeah.
looks at me and he starts talking crap about the Venezuelan to me. And I just stopped him like 3 sentences in, and I just looked at him and I was like, "I'm not on your side with this one, buddy." I was like "I'm on his side because when you talk, it's hard for me to understand you, and I'm native."
You're like, that's a you problem. That's
Yes.
I just
Yes.
think like anyone that has tried to learn another language would have more patience. I think
Right.
it says something when someone like thinks that you're not intelligent for not expressing yourself
Yeah.
well in your second or third language.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you probably have not tried to learn
Right?
another language because you don't
Right.
understand.
Like, it's not an intelligence thing, and it's crazy how many people treat you like you're really dumb, and you're like, "I'm not dumb, I just don't know how to construct these sentences in a way that is clear to you, because I don't have the management, I guess, of the language." I love that I
Mm.
say management of the language because I just translated it from Spanish to English in my head
Yeah, that
because I
was
forget.
Spanglish. I don't have the like hold of the language. I don't have control. I don't know what you would say.
I would
I
just say,
don't
like,
have
maybe the
the
level. I don't have the level of the
my God.
language that I need.
Yeah,
That's so funny.
that is really sometimes, yeah, it's difficult when you start thinking in Spanish and then you're like, I don't even know if I would ever even say this in English. Like, does that
Yes.
sentence exist?
So the guy that I'm seeing, I just told him that you and me had this discussion one time about how after teaching English so many times to people in Chile, we tend to, like, sometimes randomly, we will say the same mistakes that our students make
Yeah, yeah,
because you just hear it so much.
you do. Like sometimes, I don't know, for example, I hear so much people is and not
Yes.
people are.
Yes.
And sometimes I'll randomly say people is, and I'm thinking la gente es or la gente está. And I say people is. And I'm like, what are you guys doing to me?
Right?
Come on.
Yes. What's the other one? So much people.
Or take decisions instead of make
Oh,
decisions.
yes.
I gaslight myself. I have to think for so long about that one. I'm like, is it
Yes.
make decisions? Yes.
Yes. Actually, speaking of that, last night I was talking to Jose and he said something about make or do, like flipped
Mm,
it around. And I said, "Oh," I was like, "That's like one of the hardest things in English, I think, for native Spanish speakers is knowing the difference between when to use make and when to use do." And so he was like, "Okay, so what is it?" And I was like, "Well, I think of it as when you make something, you're actually constructing something with your hands or making something come into existence. Whereas if you're doing something, it's an action." And so then he goes, "So then why do they say make love?" And I just looked at him and I go, "You would find the exception, wouldn't you?"
That's true. Yeah. Well, like what's weird is with make, there's all of the communication related words like make a comment, make a
Mhm.
suggestion.
Yeah.
I always have that where I'm like, one is create and one is the action. And then people are like, what about this word? And I'm
Yeah,
like,
and you're just like,
what
dang
about
it.
that word? Just forget it.
Really? Do you have to just blow my example?
Yeah. And like make the bed is the same as like in Spanish. It's like you're not making
Yeah.
you could if you said like I made a bed, I would
We
be
would
like, oh,
think you
you like
meant like the
constructed it?
wood, you cut out the wood, you like nailed the pieces of board together. That's making a
A
bed.
bed. But then
Yeah.
if you're like, I made my bed, I would be like, oh, you like hiciste la cama. Like you just like organized your bed.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Super weird.
Yep. Very interesting. Ugh.
One question that I feel like would be good for us to maybe respond to, considering all of these misunderstandings, is like, after having lived through all of these like cringe situations, do you have a strategy or tip for like, I don't know, surviving misunderstandings that are kind of inevitable or like something that you do?
Yes, I do. I highly suggest repeating back to the person what you think they said,
Mm,
because if you've constructed it poorly or wrong or correctly but with the other meaning of the doble sentidos,
mhm.
then they can catch it and go, oh no, and they can explain it a little bit further. Sometimes that helps. I'm not saying that's a catch all. Ooh, what about that phrase? Okay.
Yeah,
But we'll put that one in the vocabulary for
that'll be later.
review. um but it is a something that I would try. Yeah.
Mm, for sure, yeah. And I think like maybe on a similar note, I think in the past I would just let things go. I'd be like,
Mhm.
"Oh, whatever." Like it's not that important if this person thinks I said one thing, but I said
Yeah.
something different. But I realized that you don't lose anything by being like,
Mhm.
"Wait, no, that's not what I meant."
Yeah.
'Cause it helps to be understood, and I feel like you generate more genuine relationships with people when they
Yeah.
understand what you actually wanted to say. I had a a situation where I met someone and I was asking her, she was a forestry engineer, and my question was, I met several forestry engineers and they had kind of this cool hippie vibe. So I was trying to ask, like, oh, are you guys in your career? Is there the stereotype that you're more chill, like relaxed, personality wise? And she thought that I was saying that they don't do any work and are lazy and relaxed and like it's
Oh,
not difficult, their career. Like she kind of kind
wow.
of misinterpreted that I was saying like it's relaxed and not difficult. And she kept being very defensive to me and saying, "No, it's a lot of work. I'm an engineer. I had to study. I have these certifications." And I had to
Wow.
like really take a pause and be like, "I think that there was a big misunderstanding here. Like I would never say that. I also don't think I could do your job. Like I think that it's way more complicated than I would be able to understand." And so
Oh,
I don't
so
know, I just
awkward.
like it's so awkward, but I think it just like in the end it was so worth it because
Yeah.
she saw me for like who I am and
Yeah.
saw that like I'm not the kind of person that would judge her career randomly,
Right.
even though it was like confrontationally awkward and maybe in the past I would be like, whatever, I'll just let this person hate me. I don't care.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, been there. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's good practice too. And I think one of the things that really helped me was at some point in my life, I started to realize that everything that we do that we want to get better at is a practice. And you can
Mm,
literally apply that mentality to everything. You know what? When I went to Concepcion, I was in this small town in the middle of nowhere, Talcamarida, and I that town is like such a cute little town in my head. But I read a book and it was talking about the beginner mind in Buddhism and how you have to approach everything as if you were a beginner. And I think I really like that because it brings this aspect of curiosity into everything. And that right there, I can say was something that changed my life because I stopped having an ego, stopped having as big of an ego.
Things that people with no ego say. I stopped having an ego. I
Touche.
understand you
Touche.
though.
But yeah, in instances like that, you have to kind of separate yourself from
Mm,
what's happening and say, it's okay that this is happening. Yeah, it's awkward. Yeah, I don't want this to be happening, but it's a practice. And the only way for me to get better at this language is literally to try. And that's it. Like,
mhm.
you just have to keep trying. Do not give up because the minute you give up, you've lost everything that you've worked so hard for.
Mm, definitely. And it's not easy. And I think that's actually what makes it so rewarding. Like,
Mhm.
it is so rewarding to get to the point where you're like, wow, that was a good interaction. Like, I
Yeah.
got that. I really like was
Cache?
myself in another cacharon. They understood me. I think also just like related to the ego, I feel like it is never no interaction is 100% your responsibility.
Yep.
I had a therapist say that to me once and I was like, yes.
I
Um,
like that.
I think a lot of times when we're so insecure about our language skills, we leave an interaction and we're like, that wasn't good, so it's my fault.
Yeah.
When it's like, that other person could have probably put in more effort to understand you, or
Yes.
maybe they I don't know, we have interactions all the time in our native language where one person doesn't understand the other. So, I
Yes.
think, like, not seeing it so differently when it's you in another language.
Yeah.
So, we would love to hear from you. Do you have any similar miscommunication or cultural misunderstanding? Anyone listening? If you have a situation like any of the ones that me and Layla shared today, please let us know on Instagram. You can send us a message and we would love to read them and hopefully laugh and share that moment with you like you listen to ours.
Yes. And I would say, specify whether or not you're okay with it being read on our podcast or if you're just messaging the story for a good laugh between us.
Yeah, we can keep a secret, but tell us. Tell us if it's a secret or if it's like for public use.
Or maybe we should just put a disclaimer that just says, if you message us a story, be prepared to have it shared on the podcast.
Yeah, make it
Yeah.
anonymous.
Oh, yeah.
Change the
Yes.
names or we will change them for
Right?
you.
Bobby over here.
No one will know.
Oh my God.
So, thank you all for listening. I hope that you enjoyed this episode as much as we enjoyed recording it. And stay tuned for the vocab review that we'll have in just a
Yeah.
minute.
Woo.
Hey there, English learners. If you're loving our podcast and want to take your English skills to the next level, we've got something special for you. That's right. We've launched our very own Patreon page, and it has some exclusive content. By becoming a Patreon, you'll get access to transcripts, study notes from the episodes, and interaction on our Patreon forum with us and other listeners, where we will post updates and other interesting extras. Plus, you'll be supporting the podcast and helping us create even more quality content for learners all around the world. It's super easy to join. Just head over to patreon.com/CTM English and you can become a member for just $5 a month. And don't forget, as a thank you for your support, you'll also get shout outs on our episodes. So what are you waiting for? Join our Patreon family today and let's keep learning English together.
Move over or look over. I use both of these phrasal verbs to describe the situation in duty free at the airport when I was standing at the cash register and moved to the side. This is moving over. When the cashier looked at me from across the room, this is looking over. Over is used to indicate moving across or to the side in both of these cases.
Layla says, I know you can't bring it straight onto the plane. The word straight has a lot of uses. One common one is that it means directly. For example, if you ask someone to come straight home, it means come directly home, don't go anywhere else.
Leaning. I was leaning up against the wall, waiting for my alcohol. This means to put my weight on something or put your weight on something. This is also the popular song, Lean on Me When You're Not Strong. I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. This is because you can also use this word to talk about emotional support.
Layla also said she felt like a helpless little puppy when she didn't understand what the woman in duty free was saying. Helpless means vulnerable and unable to defend oneself. If you think of this suffix in English, less, when we add it to words, it means that you don't have whatever the thing is that comes before it. So, hopeless means you don't have any hope. And helpless is like you don't have any help. You're all by yourself, and often used with like a baby lamb or a cute little animal that's very vulnerable.
My jaw dropped. When the man at the airport counter could speak in English, I said that my jaw dropped. This means that my mouth was open in surprise, as in it dropped to the ground. It's a little exaggerated.
Layla mentioned that a Chilean in the airport in Miami was trying to figure out what to do, and the security guard grunted at him. To grunt is an onomatopoeia, which means that the word itself is based on the sound that it's named after. So grunt sounds like "Rah!" This kind of sound that you can make at someone. Um, it's not very polite, but this would be a grunt.
Screw this. Talking about how confusing airports can be, I said, screw this whole process. This means I'm done with this process. I don't want to deal with it. I'm over it. Throw the whole thing away.
When talking about the food delivery people that come to her work, Layla said, I never assume that they are from Venezuela. I like this little way to remember the word assume and how it's spelled. My art teacher taught me this when I was in school. To assume makes an ass out of you and me. So if you think about writing the word assume, it's ASSU and then ME. So an ass out of you and me. It also reminds you not to assume.
Weirded out. They get weirded out when I speak in Spanish to people at work. This is a phrasal verb to say people react negatively to you and think you're abnormal, acting out of the norm.
Also, when talking about the people coming into Layla's work, she used the expression that in the beginning, when she's speaking to them in English and they don't understand, they have glazed over eyes. If your eyes glaze over, they become dull and lose all expression, usually because you're bored or thinking about something else or don't understand what's going on. So you could say, in the meeting, I really didn't get what was happening and I got bored, so my eyes glazed over.
A back and forth. When Maggie was in the bakery and continued asking for tres leches cake, and the cashier kept responding, which cake do you want? This was a back and forth, meaning the conversation is bouncing back and forth between the two people.
When talking about going straight to a Spanish language software development job interview, Layla said she went all in. And to go all in, this expression comes from poker. Imagine that you're putting all of your eggs in one basket or all of your poker chips, all of your money, you push it into the middle of the table. You put everything at risk and don't take the safe option. You go straight to the difficult option. You put everything on the line. That would be to go all in. And you can use it in a lot of ways, like with money, but you could also say if you're in a long distance relationship and you decide to just move to a different country for someone, that you went all in.
And just remember, practice doesn't make perfect. Intentional and mindful practice makes progress. And that is way more important.